Good afternoon, and welcome to today's discussion between the Herald and UND President Andrew Armacost. I'm Corey Wenzel, publisher of the Herald. This event, as always, is being broadcast live on GrandForksHerald.com, and it'll be available at our website for later viewing shortly after the conclusion today. So today's conversation continues the Herald's series of COVID-related discussions, which we hope will answer important questions as the community deals with the ongoing pandemic. President Armacost, thank you for joining us today.
Corey, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, you have an event going on today. Is that right, at the High Performance Center, a testing event?
That's right. It's become a standard piece of our landscape, and so the testing event is today, and then we have another one coming up on Saturday as well, from 10:30 till 2.
For those viewing later, just keep in mind this is actually Tuesday, the 15th of September. So what I'm about to say here is go and get tested. I was told just not a half hour ago that the wait time is actually 0. People are driving right up, walking in and getting tested. And I hate to jinx that. President Armacost, would you agree that the wait time is really next to nothing, at least right now?
Corey, I've tested 4 times over the last probably 6 or 7 weeks, and I've waited a total of 0 minutes in line to have a test taken. So I think you're absolutely right. One of the most important things we can do as either members of the campus or members of the Grand Forks citizenry is to get tested. The way that we identify where the virus is, who has it, and to take the measures to knock it down happens as a result of testing. So everybody, get your test.
Well, early on when it was at other testing events, when you would drive up, the wait was over an hour sometimes. And to tell you the truth, I was happy to do it. We're getting opportunities in this community that other communities don't have. But now, to just be able to park and drive and walk up, that's actually pretty special. And I just don't know if the Grand Forks community realizes what we have going on here.
It's incredible. And the level of support from the state of North Dakota, the State Department of Health, has been absolutely extraordinary. You go there, you see the State Department of Health folks, you see National Guardsmen, you see members of our UND campus helping out to make sure that the operation is smooth. Again, you and I are encouraging everybody to go out and get tested.
That's right. Well, and like a talk show, we've got the plug out of the way. Maybe we move on to the business now.
You bet.
The questions today. Remember, we usually run about 20 or 25 minutes. We get through 7, 8 questions usually, and these are reader submitted, and I might follow up one way or another. President Armacost was presented these questions in advance because I don't feel this is a debate. I feel this is an opportunity for thorough answers to good questions from people. So we'll kick it off. Why have we now seen a cut in the number of testing events offered since Labor Day weekend? If the point is to stay ahead of this and control the spread through identification and isolation, we should have multiple events per week, and it shouldn't be optional for students on campus, that is. It's a tool just like masking, and it doesn't work if we don't use it. So it ended in a question, but it ended in a statement, but the question prior was, why have we seen a cut? And I think essentially what the reader asks is, why isn't it optional? I mean, why is it optional?
Right. So the frequency, I'll address that piece first. I know the state is really trying to increase the number of tests. They have a total goal across the state of about 8,000 tests per day. And so as a consequence, they've made great resources available to UND and to the Grand Forks community. We had 1 week, I think it was last week, where we had a single testing event. The week prior, we had 3. I think the week prior, we had 2. So over the summer, the ordinary testing rate was 1 test per week, but that amplified as our students, faculty, and staff returned to campus. What's going to happen going forward is we have commitments for testing twice a week. So this week it's today and Saturday, the 19th. Next week it's Tuesday, the 22nd, and Wednesday, the 23rd. And the following week it's Tuesday, the 29th, and Saturday, October 3rd. So the state has been great in terms of these, the frequency of tests. Ordinarily we do anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 tests per day. And so it's really an incredible operation. We're also working with the state on a pilot project for saliva testing. And when fully implemented, it will allow us to test with greater frequency and greater volume. And so in addition, UND has purchased, it's called a Hologic Panther testing machine, and we're anticipating that to be delivered at the end of October. Again, we're at the mercy of what's happening nationally in terms of how those testing resources are distributed across the U.S. That additional capability will allow us on campus to do some spot testing and really focus in on any hotspots that we see on campus. So I'm really comfortable with the amount of testing that the state has committed to. Again, it's not going to be 1 per week. It looks like 2 per week for the next 3 weeks, and then we'll continue to work with the state to increase, hopefully getting the saliva testing as well. And then in addition, the question of mandating testing. So across the North Dakota University system, all 11 schools, there hasn't been a mandate to test. Instead, we're strongly encouraging our students, faculty, and staff to come out and get tested, which is why we're offering so many opportunities to do so.
You and I spoke earlier this summer as a follow-up to this, and I asked the same question: shouldn't it be mandatory? I believe at the time that you and/or Dr. Wynn said that at least this is getting a greater group than otherwise would be tested. I mean, is that the way you feel now?
Right, it is. I know that relative to the other schools in the system, UND has been a leader in terms of the number of tests that we administer and the percentage of our campus that has been tested. Of course, we work very closely with student leadership and student groups to keep encouraging all of the student members to come out and get tested. There's, again, no better way to identify where the virus is than by conducting these tests.
And one last follow-up on this. Could there be a point that we would reach where it would be mandatory to test?
If we got to that point, that would be, I think, a joint discussion between the campus, between myself and the State Department of Health, and also the local Grand Forks County health officials. Really, it would, I believe it would require some form of executive order or county health officer order to help us put that mandate in place.
Okay. At the end of last school year, students obviously were sent home as the pandemic took root. This question is: certain dollars were refunded to students, for example, money that had been spent on on-campus parking. But to get the refund, the college required answering an email within a certain time period, and some students simply didn't see it. Why not just refund that money without the required email?
Well, let me give you a sense of the process. Many of our refunds follow good process, and so that defined process was well known. We actually extended the deadline and sent out through our marketing office 2 different notices to notify the campus of the parking refunds. This was a 15-day extension over the normal cancellation policy. We ended up processing, just to give you a sense of the size of the number of parking refunds we gave, we had 1,590, so 1,590 returns or refunds given, and it was between $40 and $90 depending on what kind of permit the member held. So in some, we gave over $76,000 in refunds when the school shut down due to COVID. And so it was, I think, a successful approach to get the word out and to really have the students, faculty, and staff have a chance to earn those refunds.
And just to help the reader get the answer I think that they're seeking is, it ended with, why not just refund it without the required email?
Well, we need people to step up and let us know that they want the refund. And I think the 15-day extension was a good period to execute that, given that we were sending many people home so quickly. So okay, we thought it was a fair process.
So this reader asks, and first and foremost, I want you to correct this if this is not correct. I've heard that testing among students went down when testing went from throat swabs to nose swabs. Can President Armacost confirm this, or has he heard this? Why was it changed, and is it possible to stay with just throat swabs?
It's a great question about how testing changed when you switched the different types. I know that on the day I went and they did nose swabs, we exceeded the capacity of the test kits that were available that day. So I don't know that we saw any type of reduction in people showing up to get tested. So we do know that folks do prefer the throat swab due to the nasal swab. Although my sense is once I got used to the the nose swab, the second time was much easier, just because you know what to expect. And we're not able to control what type of swabs actually come in for these testing events. That's controlled by the State Department of Health. We have found that there was a ruling that allowed the nasal swabs to ultimately be used also as throat swabs. But the problem with doing so is we found that our experience was that the nasal swabs are thinner and more fragile. And we had a couple cases of those swabs breaking off in people's mouths. And we thought that if the state gives us nasal swabs, we'll stick to the nose. If they give us the throat swabs, we'll stick to the throat. But again, we're hoping to be part of the pilot program for a saliva test, which would involve no insertion of any giant Q-tip in any part of one's face. So I think we'll welcome that change. And I think most of our folks who are getting tested would welcome that as well.
And I'm just asking for a guy who might go over to the HPC after this interview. Are they doing nose or throat today?
That's a great question. I haven't gotten that update. So it'll be a random surprise when you show up. I hope whatever they give, it's the one that you prefer. But thank you for doing it. I mean, the main thing is it's a minor inconvenience to go through just a small amount of discomfort, with whether it's discomfort in the throat or discomfort in the nose, to do your duty, to identify whether you're infected, and then if so, to take the steps to isolate, and then have all of your close contacts identified for quarantine. So thanks, Corey, for going to do that.
No. This reader says, thank you, President Armacost, for creating the new UND Task Force for Diversity and Inclusion. Would you please provide an update on the task force, its composition, and what you hope to accomplish in the coming weeks? Would you also be willing to share your vision for diversity and inclusion in our campus community?
Absolutely. I'll start with the vision because I think the task force was derived from that vision. And that is, I would like a campus that is free from discrimination, free from racism, where every member of our community feels like they have a fair shot at getting a great education and to be valued for who they are and the experiences that they bring to our campus. So with that in mind, I chartered a task force on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I appointed 2 co-chairs, wonderful, wonderful campus leaders in Dr. Kara Hallgren, who's our Vice President for Student Affairs, and Professor Tamba Kui Bailey, who is a professor of education, health, and behavior. And the task force will lay an important foundation. The task force will work through the middle of October and come up with key initiatives and ideas that we should consider for adoption into our long-term strategic plan for the university. So, this group will be at it for the next 4 to 5 weeks, but the goal is to really inform how we strategically move out on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The composition of the task force has 27 members. It includes faculty members, staff members, student members, and also community of Grand Forks stakeholders as well. And they created 4 subgroups. One was to look at UND and to figure out where the barriers are at UND that might inhibit our ability to provide a diverse, inclusive, and non-oppressive community. The second is a climate survey, looking at identifying existing climate surveys that have been given at UND, and to try to assess the experiences that related to diversity that our membership has had. Then they'll look at other models of diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's at other universities or potentially best practices in the scholarly literature or within industry as well. So they have a major charter. They're doing this in 6 weeks. And I know that the passion and the talent that we have on that committee will yield some great ideas for how UND can get better.
President Armacost, I'm still with you, correct?
You're still with me. Am I with you?
Yes, my photo dropped off the page. It's possible the staff here did this for the aesthetics of it. I'm not sure, but I am still here. The next question is, has the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities dealt with any COVID violations related to students, meaning on-campus behavior?
So the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities has talked with about 20 students that have been referred to them for COVID-related behavior. But those didn't require any follow-up. So those conversations were really about making sure that those students understood the current policies and to really have them understand why compliance with those policies is so important, not only for their personal health, but also for the health of the other members of our campus community.
What comes from those violations? What are the next steps then? Well,
so if the conversations yield a change in behavior, then we say mission accomplished. If not, what can happen is those can progress to more serious sanctions, the most of which, the largest, the most extreme is to remove somebody from the campus. In other words, to suspend them from being students at UND. And interestingly, you might have questions about behavior off campus. And those, again, are reviewed by our Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities to see if a violation of our student code has occurred. And from the start of the academic year until now, we haven't had any reports of COVID-related behaviors off campus that have resulted in any violation of our code. So that's good news as well.
That's very good news. And back to the original question, you said it could lead to suspension. Has anybody been suspended?
No one has been suspended. Again, 20 students have had issues that have been referred for COVID-related behavior. But what's happened in each of those 20 cases is just a conversation so that they can better understand policy and why compliance is so important. And again, the behaviors that we had expected to modify certainly happened in each of those cases.
One last question on that. Is the behavior no masks on campus, or is it things going on in dorms, or can you give us an idea of what some of those were?
It was relatively minor infractions, and I won't go into the details, but it could be any of those items that you suggest.
Okay. The state and UND hired additional contact tracers for the university. How is that working?
So the process of contact tracing is essential to how we respond to the pandemic. So if you think about identifying a positive, we've had cases where positives then spawn a sequence of additional infections. There's one case on campus where a handful of infections then spread to more than 40 other infections over the course of about 10 days. So one of the most important ways after identifying a positive that we can work on is how do you identify those that they were in close contact with? This is where contact tracing comes in. Midway through the summer, we realized the importance of contact tracing through the infections that we saw in the middle part of the summer, and how testing and contact tracing could knock that down. So we knew that coming into the fall semester, we needed to have a great cadre of people to work on this. Initially, we thought the state and the county might have the resources to pull that off, but it became quickly apparent that as infection levels rose, not just on campus, but in Grand Forks County, that those contact tracers would be quickly overrun. So the state has provided money to UND to award a contract to hire additional contact tracers. We've hired a cadre of 29 people to serve in that role. And so those folks are beginning working on, I think, in response to today's testing. So the contact tracers that we've just hired, as we get positive cases of infection, they will immediately begin the contact tracing process beginning tomorrow, September 16th. And then in addition, we have some additional capacity through the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, which has a contact tracing contract with the state of North Dakota. So there's another 23 contact tracers associated with that program. So all in all, we know the importance of contact tracing, and I think we have a great group of people who are able to execute that. They're going through the training, or they've been trained to do this important function, and we're ready to put them to good use. Hopefully, the infection levels, though, are low, and we don't have to use all of them. So we'll see what happens with testing over the next couple of weeks.
Has UND had to hire more custodial staff or beef up operations elsewhere to deal with the pandemic?
So historically, UND has had a difficult time hiring custodial staff, and we've routinely, even before COVID, had a chronic shortage of positions. But We were able to get additional CARES Act funding to support response to COVID. And we've been able to contract with vendors to provide sufficient custodial services. So yes, we have increased the custodial services. It's happened through contract vehicles, and those contracts were made available by the CARES Act funding.
Can you give an example of the number of staff and the dollars involved?
I don't have the numbers, whether it's the number of custodians or the dollars. We're happy to provide those at a later date, though.
Okay. That was all the questions that we had officially, but I did have one more. I saw on the news, on the national news this morning, some college football conferences, or at least college football programs, are starting to have second thoughts about no football games this fall. I wonder, are there any such thoughts happening on campus here?
About adding football games?
Yes.
No second thoughts at all. I think the decision was a sound decision in terms of what we know about the spread of the pandemic. I know that there are some folks who did start to play college football this fall who are now having to modify their seasons because of infections. Health and safety is the most important factor. I think the Missouri Valley Football Conference collectively decided this is the right move, and we're looking forward to the spring season and how that plays out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today. We're at 22 minutes, right in the strike zone of where we want to be. And so hopefully President Armacost will be able to do this again at a future time. Please remember, readers, that this is online and it'll be on our website archived. You'll be able to find it there. Hopefully within the next week or two, we can do this again.
Great. I look forward to it. Thank you, Corey.
Well, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You as well.